of show number 500. And thank you, Jerbe, for letting us continue a little bit, because there's a lot to cover. And this show cycle will be with us for a while, I'd say. But without further ado, Dave, why don't you tell us about the quantum mind?
Yeah, the quantum mind and biocentrism. So it's been recently discovered that the mind works in a quantum sense. So what do I mean by quantum? So, for instance, there's a couple of very interesting ideals that drive the quantum world, and we have entanglement, where two objects themselves are linked inextricably across great distances and are in synchronized. They're synchronized for movement and polarization, etc. So, very interesting. The other is, if you had a quantum computer, it is not just ones and zeros, but it's every outcome is stored in every bit. And therefore, depending on the superposition, you're able to get an answer to a question that you haven't asked yet. It is a mind-blowing thing, and if your mind hasn't already blown, well, it's about to. So the other is, so Neki, talk about biocentrism.
Okay, well, it's essentially the idea that all the universe is centered on biological existence. Okay, and the essential criteria to meet that are necessary for biological life to exist. Okay, so it goes hand in hand, goes in some ways hand in hand with the quantum mind, but ultimately the universe was okay. The universe was is perfectly designed to house biological life, right? Mm-hmm. And this goes again to the fact that, well, why this universe, right? Why does the quantum decoherence give us this reality, right? And again, because we're here. And but biocentrism also, goes a long way toward explaining why this one is the one that we decohere into, right? But we're gonna cover that off as we gonna keep on talking about quantum effects of this universe, and then coming out of that, right, and the quantum mind as well as biocentrism, because it is such an odd thing to have this, have this universe, I don't know, be so perfect for us in many ways. We're gonna talk about this. We talked about the holographic universe, the electric universe, and the universe as a simulation. We're going to cover those off as well, mm-hmm. Right? Because ultimately we are in a prison, as they have. But we'll get to the hypothesis. But then, if we're in a prison, what is the nature of this prison? I mean, what is the nature of the universe? What is the nature of our reality? What makes us tick? Right? What is the underlying structure for this universe, this matrix we all inhabit? Is it, in fact, as real as we think it is, or is it something else? And then we already talked about dimensional travelers, shifts, anomalies, and the bell. Which we haven't spoken about the bell, but there's a school of thought that believes the Nazis opened up dimensional travel with
the toroidal
bell.
The toroidal toroidal motion of red mercury, electrified red mercury.
Yeah. Now, didn't they? There are indications that the Nazis did unlock many secrets, and some have been turned into B-grade movies, and there's also a lot of books. Joseph P. Farrell has written a lot of interesting books on the subject matter, Reich of the Black Sun, and others. It's really the mystery of the Nazi bell and others. It's a fascinating read once you get into it. But Dave, why don't you take us through the Mandela effect and time travel?
With pleasure. The Mandela effect was something that I experienced firsthand. I'm in the group of people. So what is the the Mandela effect. It's where a group of people remember a certain history, a historical event, or something related to their existence as a group with a different memory to other group or another group or maybe everybody else. And these effects are global. As far as we know so far, we haven't determined that it's anything but only within our rendered universe is probably the best way I could put it. So the Mandela effect for me, it's aptly named for Nelson Mandela, who in Africa went to prison. What happened next determined this effect. Now, I'm in a group, or the group, which quantity of people unknown, which heard on the television and other media, like on radio, it was publicly known and announced that he had passed away due to an illness in prison. I remember this. I remember sitting around a breakfast table, seeing the news on television, discussing this with the family. What is this going to mean as a net result? What's the net outcome of having Nelson Mandela pass away? You've got to think of what this means. Yeah, what was the world outcome? Was it we're going to get peace? What was going to happen? Anyway, after deliberating those ideas at the breakfast table, life went on until, of course, his release from prison. It's like, how could that be? He was dead. Did they just wheel his bones see out the rest of his sentence? And they just wheeled him outside, swept the cell out, and that was it. No, he was alive and well. There's footage of him. Like, what on earth happened? And then I spoke to other people, and they go, "What do you mean he died in prison? That never happened." Now, I didn't make up the term Mandela effect. This is it occurs in a grand scale. One of the other few little tidbits that we became, aware of since is the Berenstain versus Berenstain children's book and videos. Crazy that this, you would think, oh, maybe for the Western audience, right? They renamed Berenstain to Berenstain to sort of like Westernize the name. Nope, that didn't happen, apparently. And there's people who know it as one, and there's people who know it as another, and there's unaltered images of people presenting one or the other. And it wasn't a knockoff. They're the same publishing house. There's the same distributors. Like, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Aware, though, some things like Mad Max in Australia was Road Warrior in America. Airplane in America was Flying High in Australia. They were intentional decisions which you can find historically, and there's a reference to them, and it's all admitted that this is a thing. This, however, wasn't. There was never a media retraction. Sorry, we got it wrong. It was the universe that we lived in. It's almost like, Mekki, if there was a time machine and some agency of the government was able to slightly modify this here and do that there, but not go out and kill Hitler, yeah? Not stop the Titanic from getting hit by the glacier, right, or the iceberg. Not do those things, but just that little tinkering around the edge, because making any significant change would have a disastrous effect to the outcome, an unpredictable outcome.
That's correct.
If JFK wasn't shot, we wouldn't have JFK Airport. Do you know what I'm saying? We'd be on the gold standard in America for currency. Not the petrodollar. There'd be some really crazy things that occurred, right? So the Mandela effect is the visual identification or acknowledgement that there is certainly two different groups of people in this crazy topsy-turvy world, Mekki, where we have communication with everybody on the planet if we wanted to, right? And we're finding these little tiny things out, which we never would have known before. So
that is correct. It's the internet that brought it out. You're right.
It is. This is the world we live in now. So that's why I've mentioned time travel at the same time, because it could be that's the cause. It certainly could be the Large Hadron Collider, the LHC. We don't know the true cause of it. I mean, its creation came about around about, and the design right about the time Contact, the movie, came out. And I'm a true believer that sci-fi kind of radios ahead some things for us. Maybe there was an encoded message. Maybe this is a transport device. Maybe, and they're going to build a bigger one. Maybe it just wasn't powerful enough. How, Mekki, if you and I could sit in front of a board of people with tons and tons and tons of money to spend, and we could get them to build a machine that has nearly no output that makes any sense to anyone except for the scientists that are working on it, even those scientists actually blamed themselves coming back in time to interfere with the machine to prevent it from working. I think they've been underground too long, right?
Get the butterfly net.
Right? So even the scientists working on the LHC were convinced that they would travel back in time from the future to prevent the machine from operating. That's what they said in an interview. And they meant it. So if they're close to this machine and they believe that's something that could happen, then I don't think, my comically joke that they've been underground too long. I think truly they know something about this machine that no one else knows. Like there's another outcome, like this UAP thing, unacknowledged program. Could you imagine if it did actually open up a portal? Because the scientists, Mekki, that talk about spinning a cylinder on its long axis and pushing something through that gap in the cylinder will actually take it somewhere else, to another dimension. It's the math around the quantum world suggests that is actually indeed possible. So, what is a LHC? It's a large spinning, the particles in it are rotating like the outer ring of a cylinder. Maybe the world is cottoning on to what they're actually doing. Maybe it doesn't open a very small, maybe it only opens up a very small, cylinder of, portal, and they need to build a bigger one in order to maybe a vehicle in or something, right? I don't know. But anyway, so the time travel thing, what if Mekki and I are in a protest, what do we want? And you say,
time travel.
When do we want it?
Doesn't matter.
That's right, it's irrelevant. The time travel law says if it's ever been invented, it'll already be there. And some other time travel law, which I was actually debating with my 15-year-old or to be 15-year-old about this, and she said, well, it could only ever go back as far as the invention of the machine. You couldn't go back in time before then. I said, why? Why would you limit that? Oh, it's just that's in a certain realm of, science fiction. I said, but is the machine an anywhere, anytime machine, or is it only an anytime machine? Because that's important. Because in Red Dwarf, they had a tremendous example of being 3 million years in the future from today. And he goes, well, set the time machine, because they discover it. They're also 3 million years away from Earth in time as well, not just, they're not just sitting in orbit. And they go, oh, okay, well, set it back to, 1989 or whatever, right? And he goes, bloop. And he goes, yep, 1989 it says. And I look out the window and see the same stars. And he goes, I thought this would take us back to Earth. He goes, no. Look, it just says we've gone back 3 million years. We're here now at the date you said. It was only an any time machine. It wasn't an anywhere machine, not time and place. So, bit crazy, Mickey. One of the things I want you to talk about the next thing, and we brought this up in one of our very earliest shows.
Yeah, look, secret societies, right? We strongly believe, obviously, they're a real thing, and that they're secret societies, or they're societies with secrets. The presidents in an election in the dim and distant past, well, not really, only about 20 or so years ago, belonged to the same secret society. Skull and bones, as it were, Harvard institution. Oh, sorry, Yale, I should say. And Harvard. I got double check. I think it's Yale. And out of 300 million people, these two people belonged not in the same year. They were a couple of years apart. And this society only has a standing membership of about living members any given time, only about 300 or so. Because every year only a few people are tapped, selected, that is, to join that fraternity. And then, out of 300 million people, you have two people that belong to that club of 300 people. That seems a little odd in my book, but that's okay. Who am I to say these things? But look, there's also knowledge that is being ferried across time by secret societies, by societies that have secrets, by people that have, bonded together to preserve certain pieces of knowledge. And some of the things we have presented to you is that knowledge that has come to us through rather clandestine or occulted ways. So some of the insights we have here are fairly unique. Actually, I shouldn't say fairly. They are unique, because unique is an absolute term. You can't say something isn't, fairly unique. It is unique or it isn't. So yeah, our insights are unique in some ways, because we have the experience and we know people. We know people. But I do want to get along a bit here, because I do want to share the purpose of the hypothesis with you. So I'm going to, in quick succession, then I hand it back to my esteemed colleague. I want to say some of the other subjects we've discussed: magic, death and resurrection, mind control, fiat currency, comparative mythology, and specifically flood myths. So magic, death and resurrection, mind control, fiat currency, and comparative mythology. We did entire show cycles on. I urge you to go on and look what we discussed there. Death is certainly not the end, it seems. Resurrection is also a thing. Reincarnation we already discussed. Magic is a real thing. Think of magic as just another natural force like electricity or magnetism. The ability to tap into it is, of course, what the magic's practitioners strive for, and I believe it was once a very common thing and has sort of gone into disuse over time, deliberately. Mind control, I don't think we have to spend too much time on. Again, Montauk is probably the key thing to remember. Montauk happened. We just discussed it.
Yeah, it did. And to add to that, the psychological profiling from the large tech companies could easily build a character or make everyone happy little Vegemites. We can do that today.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a funny thing. You should say that. So we actually have come into the wildest dreams of Goebbels and his propaganda machine. Where people are. I mean, ask yourself, when was the last time you made a truly free decision that wasn't influenced by something or something, subtly persuading you to do something. When you feel a craving for something, when was the last time you bought that completely useless thing that you don't really need, but you had to buy it, right? And these are just small examples.
That's right.
Right?
When did you walk up to the tomatoes in the thing and go, gee, they really are juicy?
Oh, look at they're that special kind of red. It's whiter than white. So what's whiter than white? Come on. Right. No, but we are living in a world where mind control is very, very subtle, but all pervasive. In fact, to the point where people like us are the enemy. Dave and I, we're the enemy. People like us, because oh no, don't we can't. No, just stop rattling the cage. Alarm. What you doing? Yeah, beep, beep, and the box is gonna fall off the table. Oh, we can't have that. We need that box. Now, fiat currency and the monetary system, which we call the greatest long con in history, that was a show cycle one of the biggest ones we had, one of the most important ones to understand, just to understand just how far the parasites would go to control us, and just how criminally corrupt the system is we live in. Really have to understand the fiat currency and monetary system, including fractional reserve lending. You must understand it. If you do not understand it, you're not equipped to live in this world, right? Please do understand it. A comparative mythology, of course, harks back to the archetypes and things that happened in the past, the flood myths. I mean, we had more show notes on the flood myths than anything else, attesting to the fact that the flood myths are all pervasive throughout all of Earth's cultures.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, certainly some are cultural importations, so that's absolutely true. But it is the differences that speak to the truth of this statement, not the similarities. It's the differences in the flood myths that give it credence, right? And that brings it to your section, my friend.
Yeah. Thanks. I'm just gonna state at the top of this that I love the leader, and
me too.
So, Agenda 21. We all know what it is, and I needn't go too deep into it. But some of the topics that we were talking about was the depopulation agenda specifically, and at the time when we did the show, there wasn't coronavirus; there was Ebola, and the bird flu, the swine flu, and all of the other things that were getting around and popping their head up from time to time. We spoke about what Agenda 21 would look like if there was a virus, the rationalization of the planet's population. Let's put it that way. That'd be great for the YouTube algorithm to have a look at. That we did talk about that. Linguistic mysteries, isolate languages specifically, and that kind of joined together with, well, what was the civilization that popped up out of nowhere with a brand new language, a written language too, by the way, and policing, health, governance, farming, city building, and everything that it takes to support that as a supply chain, just crazy. And then joining all of those together, where was that? And it was Sumer.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the biggest and best example of that. And one of my friends of the show is in the chat, and I shared some of those Sanskrit conversion tables and research into the language, and how trade was so prevalent with other languages that there was an ability there to be able to decipher what it says, and it stayed on rocks as receipts for such a long time, and it was just something else. It's the earliest language that we know about that's written, and yet we're still looking at the original writing, because they wrote either on clay or they etched it into stone. So it's not been translated 1,000 times and is intact. And I think that makes it more special than having a Rosetta Stone and a whole bunch of civilizations that already existed. I think something's very, very, very special about that. Anyway, telepathy and the original language. And this is spoken about, and this is the Antediluvian as well, where there was an original language that was spoken by all of the countries of all the peoples of the world. Telepathy, which is mistranslated, kind of means speaking at you, right, Becky?
That's correct.
Yeah.
But go on.
But the true experience of telepathy is more conceptual. It includes an inbuilt download of more than just someone speaking at you rather, but there's an emotional connection. There's the idea and premise around it. And if I was to say, I'm going to use the same wording I've used every time, and that is, born in a dead man's town. There's a context around that, which is an understanding of what it truly means. And I think that is also provided in the download. So if you'd never heard someone speak before and walked into a room with people talking, you would attempt to try to make those same sounds. And I think if you're exposed to telepathy just the once in a room full of people doing it, you'll understand at least the minute first baby steps into what does that mean for you, and how can you achieve it too. So there's something about that. Of course, after the flood, all the peoples were separated and given their own languages so that they could not communicate again. And that message is something else. And of course, that ties in then with myths, legends, folk and fairy tales. Across the whole of Europe, there are fairy tales. And I know the Brothers Grimm scoured the country for these stories to note them down and get them into paper, and rather than having them lost. But what we know, Meki and I know, is myths, legends, stories, and folk and fairy tales have something extremely unique to them to keep them alive. And the stories that have remained intact are because there's a meter and a rhyme usually. And if you screw the wording up, then the rhyme doesn't work and the meter doesn't work. And swapping words in and out fails. So it's the same as having a summary or a sum bit on a packet of information. It makes you be able to find the missing piece. That's in technology, but it's the same thing with spoken word. If you have a beautiful story around the outside, it's usually not broken up. And if you have meter and rhyme, it doesn't either. So it keeps these things intact. Now, without written language, oral, the passing down of orally of these stories was the only thing we had. So luckily, they have remained intact for the most part. I was trying to tell someone the other day, Meki, that the Shakespearean writings were in a Cockney accent, and it makes sense in Cockney because the pronunciation of the words make the rhyme funny, because the expectation of the word that is basically the punchline is predicted in a sentence before you get there. It only works, but if you'd use proper English to read Shakespeare, it doesn't. It completely fails. The mispronunciation makes it work, or the accent makes it work. And my friend did a thesis on that. Extraordinary, as a doctorate or something.
Oh, wow.
Crazy, right? And then subsequently went and translated it into other languages to make the rhyme work too. Giants, also antediluvian. The Igigi, antediluvian as well. The Igigi were a surprise to both Becky and I as a discovery.
Yeah.
They were the people that served the Anunnaki and then ended up like as a union, agreement for them to no longer have to do the toil because the toil was too hard. Crazy.
That's a fascinating thing. And if you haven't listened to it, I urge you to listen to the Igigi Shore cycle. It is fascinating.
Yeah, something that we didn't even like. We knew some of these topics. We didn't know all of them. I think the important part here is that when they came to light, it was like a light being turned on. When they came to light, a light being turned on, and that was pun intended. Megalithic cultures, not just the structures, but the cultures themselves, around the entire planet appear to have a tools down event all around about the same period with the same two things. Their stone work capabilities, but also their stone work constructions were identical. And according to the timeline, that's impossible. according to the timeline, they didn't even have the way to communicate with each other, let alone, be able to share designs. I mean, we're talking, landlocked islands. We're talking, sorry, landlocked islands. That's not right. Islands, landlocked countries, before the Ice Age, before the big flood, there was a common language, and it's all been discovered, researched, and there's all the information. It's quite a shock also. A lot of these topics, man, they just got me. They got me from my core, not knowing why isn't this being taught? Anyway.
It's surprising, yeah.
What about utopia, Mickey?
Well, utopia, every culture talks about a utopian state of existence. Now, interestingly enough, one of the oldest ones, the Dreamtime, is completely misunderstood. I did some recent research into it. So the golden age utopia, like a time when everything was awesome, and there was milk and honey, and we would just lie in the sun all day, etc., etc. Now, the dreaming or the Dreamtime of the Aboriginals would qualify for that as well. However, it is not a place in time, and I think because it is such an old culture, I think the Aboriginals probably have the right of it. For them, the dreaming is now. The dream time is now. It is an every when event, but we are separated from it. So this world we're in is separating us from the dream time, from the dreaming, from utopia, if you will. And to me, this is just another indication that the hypothesis is actually coming together quite nicely. Thank you very much. And our postulations are bearing the hallmarks of now, theories and truths. We are dealing with concepts that seem to be very natural and common to a lot of the, the native peoples around the world, but even ancient cultures. Yes, there is an ideal state of existence, but it didn't happen in the past. It exists now. We just can't get to it. Our utopia is no longer in reach, right? Because we are imprisoned here in this, whatever this is, right?
It exists where it is, but we can't get to it.
We can't get to it. Can't get to it. And it's really fascinating because a lot of people think that the dream time is something that happened in the past, but that's a complete misunderstanding of the Aboriginal concept. All right? It is not that. It didn't happen. It is now. We just can't get to it. Or, well, most of us can't. Very important concept, right? So all of these short topics, and actually have been more, and certainly we had guests, and we're going to mention those in a second. In fact, I'd like Dave to share some of those names and maybe add some that he personally enjoyed the most, but they all are pointing into the direction of the hypothesis. So we didn't set out to formulate a hypothesis at all. We didn't. That was not the intention of this show. We wanted to show connections and bridges, and we wanted to understand more of the totality of our existence. But as it went on over the last 10 years, and we both came in with a certain amount of knowledge, the clearer it became that all of these things are pointing in a direction. And a lot of the guests we interviewed, when we posted to them, would say, yeah, look, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. And these are researchers, really great researchers, in my opinion, in their own right, much more known than we are by a country mile, certainly some of them. And they tended to agree with some of our postulations. But Dave, why don't you take us to some of the guests and maybe highlight some of the ones that you enjoyed the most?
Yeah, no dramas at all. So our guests have included some absolutely star people in my consideration. So Jim Mars, one of the best researchers ever, was so enlightening and I think I was in awe. I was just a big fan,
me too.
Big fan during that interview. He spoke about that. I think that the buried alien in the pre-flight crash, alien crash, pre-human flight that was in a cemetery in a small town. Jose Escamilla, our first guest, and he started with rods, but then was talking about the color of the moon. And sadly,
that's fascinating stuff.
I know, right? And we've only ever been shown black and white, and we have an impression that it's only black and white. But some of the soils are brown coloured, and and so one of the persons that was assisting him in that was a terrestrial a person here on Earth with a telescope. Bill Bryson was providing the imagery for him, and NASA said, "How did you get that image?" Right? That was extraordinary. Laura Eisenhower is it granddaughter of Dwight D. Eisenhower? Had some extraordinary messages to tell us, like his, watch out for the military-industrial complex statement, but more agreements between the American government and the Greys and a whole bunch of alien connection there. Solaris, absolutely champion in her field, researcher TV. She's been on TV. She has done a video documentary. She has books. She has 2 different radio programs on different stations. She's amazing. And if you've heard psychotronic programming or psychotronic warfare, she's the lady that you need to talk about or need to research. She has a show on Revolution Radio, and her stuff's in the archives. You really do. I can't impress you upon you anymore than to go and review her stuff. Lloyd Pye, man, crazy Star Child Skull, yeah. He happened to...
We contacted. Sorry,
yeah,
we contacted
you did.
His wife because
you contacted his wife,
Yeah.
expecting to get her, and then it wasn't.
What happened was, exactly, and we got him, which was fantastic, and he came on. He has since passed away, and his research was taken over by a group that is no longer associated with his wife or his research, and they have gone completely off tangent. And she says all the work that he did is now going to completely being undone by these people, because we did a tribute show to him, and it was sad to see that the hard work they had done was now pretty much, I don't know, it was buried, essentially. That's what happened, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And she was quite upset, which is understandable, but we made very clear in our show as well that another group of people had taken over the research, which was in no way associated with the Star Child project.
Yeah,
sorry,
that was very, very clear. Yeah. So Kerry Cassidy, was it Project Camelot? I think.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, Ole Domagard, a lot of political and geopolitics discussions there. Dane Wigington, he's the fellow looking at the changing climate and how chemtrails are changing the planet. We don't hear very much about that anymore, but it's definitely a thing with 50 companies in the US claiming that they're doing weather modification, though everyone claims that weather modification isn't even a thing. And there's proof everywhere of that. Those clouds that tend to spread and cover the whole sky after a plane's gone over, which isn't the contrail. All right, it's a chemtrail. So Stan Deyo, my goodness, an American scientist that worked over here at Pine Gap with a whole bunch of other international scientists who said on our show that he developed within the team developed anti-gravity and well confirmed that. And when he came out publicly about their discovery, he was basically jettisoned from the US. He was living in shared houses until the heat went down, until he could return again. Just some crazy, like, I have to say, didn't think it even happened until I started speaking with him. And he verified the concepts that I had about how anti-gravity ships would work, about, holding on to where you are in time and space, reaching out to where you want to go to, pulling it to where you are, and then simply, because that's folding space, and then letting go of where you were, and you just appear to an observer to dart across the sky. However, you didn't move at all in your frame of reference from a physics standpoint. Stanton Friedman, oh my goodness, Probably
Yeah,
one of the. Didn't we ask him how he was, and then the 2 hours was up.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
We didn't even get to say another word. Right?
That's
An absolute
brilliant.
champion. And sadly, once again, he's no longer with us. Suzanne Chancellor, another experiencer, but in the US, who had almost identical experiences to me. And we had a lot of discussions off air where, we finished each other's sentences. She's a few years older than me, but lives in California. Amazing to have been able to chat to her. That was her. We were her first radio interview for her experiences.
Is that right?
Yeah, she had a blog about them, which I found and then interviewed her subsequently. And extraordinary. Andy Thomas, author. Judy Carroll, author. Kathleen Martin. She is the Barney Hill granddaughter. Brian Forster, he goes around the world looking at this stonework, and said there's definitely a pre-Aztec, not pre, what's it called?
It's African. It's a pre-Mayan, but he also is very active in South Africa.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, he's done work everywhere. Tony Healy as well. He was the Cryptids Fellow from Australia that went down to Tasmania. We interviewed him shortly before he left, and he's not allowed to discuss anything that he discovered looking for the thylacine.
Freedom of speech.
Yeah, it's everywhere. You don't want it to be. James Bartley, another person from military bases in the US with declarations of there being operations and unacknowledged projects out there, which are now coming to light. Christopher O'Brien, cattle mutilation fellow. Clifford Stone. He was 52. He said, when I left the forces, there were at the time 52 alien species that we had documented in contact with the US or visiting Earth. Gerald Celente, I actually really enjoyed that interview. He's a finance guy, and the fiscal cliff. And while we seem to be, loitering on the cliff, it doesn't take much to push us over. Barry Taylor, another Australian UFO ufologist, I should say. George Simpson, amazing fellow. He's been on the show a number of times, and he's been researching both Westall and the Valentich case. That was the plane that went missing, where it flying from Australia down to one of the islands, King Island or thereabouts, in near Tasmania, and describes the UFO. Just something else. Mekki,
that's it.
I have to tell you that I didn't know that we'd have the contact with the people that I've seen them on television. I've read their books. I didn't think we'd have the ability to talk to them firsthand.
It's humbling, and it is also a privilege to. I mean, these are people that like Dave said, we had read, watched in conferences, watched in videos on YouTube, etc., even prior to YouTube, of course. But and having the ability to speak to some of them, and unfortunately, quite a few have now passed on, really makes me very grateful, and I don't know, it's just one of those things that no one can take away from you. Because you had a meeting of minds, you shared certain insights, and you got to ask them questions that might have been burning inside of you all that time. So doing this show has been an extremely enriching experience for us, I think, personally, professionally even, if you will, because obviously one day, hopefully, we can make this a full-time undertaking, even if it is after retirement, whatever it might be. But I'd like to, spend all my time investigating, researching, and finally putting pen to paper and put out something meaningful. That's taking shape. It has been taking shape for 10 years, but it's a hard slog when you have to do a full-time job, right? But yeah, but this show and what Nighthawk allowed us to do is a phenomenal opportunity, right? To gather yourself, to do the research, because you have an excuse to do it. It's well, you have to have something ready for Sunday, 2 hours of, because you don't want to just talk about stuff. You want to have something interesting. You want to talk about something that maybe even find something new, right? Learn something and be able to share with people your journey of discovery. And this is really what we're doing here as well, right? And have been doing for nigh on 500 shows. The show's coming to a close soon. But this is what we're going to start with next time, and that's what I will leave you with before we finish very quickly. And I called it first things first. Clearly that didn't happen today, because we did want to look at some of the topics we discussed with you over the years and some of the guests we had. And now this was written 9 years ago for the very first 100th show, or 8 years ago, but many years ago. Okay. Now, number one, there exists a power construct, a box, if you will, in which we all live. We're all indoctrinated early on to live within that box. This box is not of our choosing, yet most of us spend living their lives in that box, and most never know it. The box is set up to be self-perpetuating. Agencies within the box have become privy of its existence and exploit the nature of the box for their own purposes. I call them the institutionalized. There is no physical escape from the box. There is no out as perceived within our four-dimensional existence. Reincarnation ensures that we always return to the box, most without any knowledge of our former lives. Everything within the box, which we deem good and right, as it enables us to live in the box, is in fact the exact opposite. This knowledge is the most dangerous knowledge, and in the past, most who purported to know it or were suspected of knowing were persecuted and killed. It was knowledge handed from master to disciple, never written down. The knowledge at this point of time is slowly seeping into the general population, ever so slowly. We seem to be approaching critical mass, a rapture-like event potentially, which would free us from the box. This was written, like I said, 8 years ago. The best way to stop this awareness cascade is mass destruction and mass death, as it has happened in the past. One must acknowledge the box before one can think of planning an escape. Now, in that time, since we've written this, Dave, and we picked, and we'll get to that as well, we picked 2020 as the year of the rapture-like event, the awareness cascade, as we call it, and it didn't happen. Unbeknownst to us, Aboriginal elders gathered at Uluru to do exactly that, to bring about some kind of consciousness-lifting event, if you will. But the fear, and the stress and terror that had been induced by the event of, SARS-CoV-2, in my opinion, was enough to not have that event happen in its full potential. Right? So again, this was written, some years ago. The critical mass point was reached, and we missed our opportunity. And none of these things happened by chance, or yet this virus just happened to be released into the world. Sure. This thing became bigger than Ben-Hur, Dave. I remember when we first talked about it, a few thousand people, and then all of a sudden it was in Italy, and then thousands of people in Italy died, and then all of a sudden it was everywhere, and we were scratching our head and because initially I thought, no, this can't be it, because I remember this vividly. It's going to be biological, whatever it is. It's the cheapest way to do it. And then all of a sudden there it was. Now, I didn't want to be right about it. I can tell you that. When I wrote this, like when we put this together for the first time some years ago, it seemed like the concept was correct, and it seemed like the math was right, the algorithm, and the thinking behind it as well. So we put it on paper.
And I didn't
really expect it.
We put it in the show and we aired it, and then it seemed as though everything was coming together for it, the thing we thought. 4.8, pretty much 4.9 million people have died because of the virus.
Yeah.
This is a life-changing event.
I didn't want to be right.
There was kids in the hospital that I was talking to, the nurses, and they said these children that are here, these ones specifically, they've never seen a human face without the mask on.
Is that right?
Yeah, because you can't be without a mask in the hospital.
No. Of course, that is horrendous.
Isn't that something else?
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, I'll be honest with you. This was an intellectual exercise for me. Initially, it really was. It was just okay. Well, this because I approached it very clinically from a scientific point of view. I mean, this is the evidence that's here. Let's see where it leads us. And we build it, we put it together, and we put it forward. We are on the record with it. But it was a scientific exercise. It was a mind experiment, if you will. And then all of a sudden it started unfolding. It takes you aback. You might expect it, but when it happens, you're still taken aback. Right? It is not an easy thing to come to terms with.
The same with an uprising or a war.
Yeah.
You didn't think it was going to happen until it happens. I love that quote of yours.
Oh, which one?
Oh, that one I just said.
Oh yeah, no, you're right though. That's true, right? And but that's it. And it's I really wish we were wrong about it. I really wish that this wasn't the thing. But now it has happened. I know that at least component parts of the hypothesis are correct.
Yeah.
And if component parts are correct, because it is such a coherent tapestry, it is quite conceivable that the hypothesis in its entirety or in large parts, not just component part, but large parts, is also correct. Because this is not stuff that we made up. This is stuff that has come together from many, many different sources over many, many thousands of years. Different insights, different people contributing to the overall picture. And I don't think it's the first time people have tried to attempt this, right? Because there are mystery schools that are teaching exactly that. The Hindus and Buddhists believe it, the Taoists believe it, right? The Gnostics believe this is not the real world. This is not new. None of this is new. But we're living in a time where we could have had an escape. And we'll get to how we can escape individually. We'll talk about that as well as part of the show cycle. You can. It's not easy, but you can. And I'm going to revisit the algorithm to see when the next nexus point is. What number.
While. So, hey, Mekki, do you know what I wanted to do right now? I wanted to thank our beloved founder of Revolution Radio, Nighthawk, for trusting in us and having the platform for these discussions, which we've enjoyed for 10 years. I'd like to also extend the warm thanks to Jer Bear, who gave up an hour of his show for us to be able to put this large piece in as our anniversary show. 500, Mekki.
And that's crazy, right?
500 shows. Just like Mick Jagger said. Yeah, Mick Jagger said, I hope we're still playing music next year on his first year. You kind of keep thinking that. So the music's going to start any second. This has been David Mekki's Shiny Side Out on freedomslips.com. This is the part 2 of show 500, and on the same day as part 1. And we'll see you next week for another Shiny Side Out with David Mekki. And look, stay tuned for Jer Bear and his awesome after-hours show, which no doubt will come into full swing on the other side of this very short break coming up. And we really, really appreciate this platform, and also to every single listener that has been a part of our shows over the 10 years. While we've lost a lot of those too, and a lot of hard-working people in the background within Revolution Radio, I cannot say this enough. From the bottom of my heart, we thank you with the most sincerest and humblest thank yous. All right. And of course, the music should have come by now. Still waiting for the music.
No, it's just a few seconds of timing, right? No, but look, yes, I completely and wholeheartedly agree. Please come back next week to listen to the next installment of The Hypothesis.
There we go. All right. Yeah, well, stay tuned for Jebez After Hours, and look, keep them wanting more, Meki.
Keep them wanting more.
And on that note, I think there's messaging in that for all of us. I'm just going to drop the station. I'll let the producer deal with it. Thank you, guys. Take care.